Have you ever noticed how fierce competitors in the corporate world often end up acting completely identically? I mean, they adopt the same corporate structures, they launch identical sustainability initiatives, they even start using the exact same office jargon. If business is supposedly all about radical innovation and ruthless competition, why does corporate behavior so often look like a synchronized swimming routine? Right? What is the hidden mechanism forcing everyone to fall into line? Well, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover the hidden forces that dictate how companies operate way beyond just making a profit. Today, we're going to explore the invisible rules of the game that shape how absolutely every business behaves, and why following these unspoken rules is literally a matter of corporate survival. So here's our game plan for today. First, the invisible rulebook. Second, the power of normal. Third, the prize is legitimacy. And fourth, changing the game. Let's start with part one, the invisible rulebook. When we talk about institutions in business, we aren't talking about a physical building, like a bank or a university. We're talking about the rules of the game. Institutions are simply the humanly devised constraints, the enduring social structures and shared meanings that shape how we behave. Think of them as the invisible tracks that tell us what is acceptable and what is totally out of bounds. Now, these rules basically come in two distinct flavors. On one side, we have formal rules. These are your hard laws, regulations, and property rights, stuff that is actually written down and legally enforced. But on the flip side, we have informal constraints. These are the unwritten social customs, the office taboos, and the unspoken industry standards. And honestly, it's often these informal rules, the whole way we've always done things vibe, that govern daily corporate culture far more rigidly than any legal document ever could. Let's move to part two, the power of normal. Even though human beings literally invent these rules, they are remarkably durable. Why is that? Well, because over time, they become a shared reality that is simply taken for granted as normal. Think about the standard 9-to-5 workday or the traditional job interview. They're so embedded in our daily routines that questioning them just feels weird. Institutions survive because they slip right into our subconscious. We stop seeing them as humanly devised constraints, and we start treating them like fundamental laws of nature. But make no mistake, maintaining this illusion of normal takes a ton of active work. To prevent these rules from falling apart, companies and industries engage in continuous maintenance. They enable the rules by creating new roles, like when the ISO 9000 manufacturing standards required an entire army of official registrars just to keep things running. They police the rules through constant audits, sanctions, and performance reviews, and they routinize the rules by baking them so deeply into everyday training and hiring practices that compliance literally becomes pure muscle memory. Which brings us to part three. The prize is legitimacy. So, you might be wondering, why do fiercely competitive corporations even bother following these invisible made-up rules? Well, by following them, they earn something called legitimacy. In plain terms, legitimacy is the ultimate social stamp of approval. It's demonstrating to the world that your company is worthy, acceptable, and rational. In the game of business, legitimacy isn't just some nice-to-have bonus. It is the absolute prerequisite to staying on the board. Without legitimacy, a company is essentially paralyzed. Just look at the rewards of playing along. When a company conforms to the accepted rules of the game, it unlocks access to investor capital, wins the trust of customers, and attracts top-tier employee talent. It gains prestige, stability, and this amazing shield of invulnerability against public questioning. Because if you don't look and act like a legitimate business according to society's invisible rulebook, investors will pull their money, customers will walk away, and your company simply will not survive. Finally, part four, changing the game. It turns out companies actually have a whole continuum of strategic responses to this institutional pressure. Researcher Christine Oliver mapped out 5 specific responses. At the top, we have acquiescence, basically just playing along and conforming completely. Then there's compromise, where a company meets the pressure halfway with superficial adaptations. Avoidance is essentially just hiding your nonconformity. But then it gets spicy. Defiance is actively fighting back and challenging the rules. And finally, the most aggressive move is manipulation, where a company actively co-opts, shapes, and rewrites the very rules being forced upon them. Let's look at a prime example of manipulation in action: advocacy. When companies want to change or create new institutions, they don't just sit back. They mobilize political and regulatory support through direct social suasion, things like lobbying, funding research, or launching massive public awareness campaigns. They are working actively to shape public perception, defining what is seen as normal and acceptable, effectively writing the new rules in their own favor. Another highly sophisticated defensive tactic is the creation of a concept researchers call an incommensurable. Now, this is a big word for a fairly simple idea. When regulators try to force standardization or exact measurement onto a financial market or an industry, powerful incumbents will often resist by claiming their work is an incommensurable. They argue that their specific field is far too unique, too idiosyncratic, and too bespoke to ever be accurately measured or governed by standard, one-size-fits-all rules. It's a brilliant way to resist change without sounding like you are rejecting the concept of regulation entirely. Now, when entrepreneurs or companies do decide to build an entirely new rulebook, acting as actual game changers, they engage in highly specific creative work. First, they mobilize allies, building strong networks of cooperation. Second, they reconfigure public beliefs. They educate the market and use mimicry, cleverly associating their radical new idea with an already accepted practice to make it feel safe. And finally, they create structures. They name the new practice, define it, and theorize exactly how it works. By putting a label on something, they literally cement it into reality. And we've seen this exact process play out throughout history. In the early days of radio, total chaos was replaced by order when major players formed patent pools, constructing entirely new networks and rules for the whole industry. When the balanced scorecard was introduced in accounting, its creators didn't just write a dry paper. They used specific visual artifacts and taxonomies to win over skeptics and standardize their innovation. And in the early American film industry, the courts dramatically changed the game by invalidating the old patent institutions held by Thomas Edison, completely dismantling monopolies and allowing new independent studios to rise up. As this quote perfectly summarizes, the enduring structures of our corporate world are not handed down by the universe. They aren't natural laws. They are the product of purposive action. They are actively built, maintained, and sometimes completely destroyed by people and organizations working with intent. So we're left with a pretty powerful realization today. The invisible rulebook that dictates business behavior is constantly evolving, maintained only by our collective agreement to actually follow it. Since these rules are just made up by the players on the board, ask yourself this: is your organization content with just playing the game to survive? Or are you getting ready to rewrite the rules entirely? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to uncover the hidden frameworks of our world.